The smell of frankincense and myrrh hung heavy in the grand ceremonial hall, mingling with the collective scent of hundreds of werewolves dressed in their finest attire. I kept to the shadows at the farthest edge of the room, my fingers nervously tracing the silver wolf pendant that hung around my neck, the last gift my grandmother had given me before she died. "Remember, Ilara," she'd whispered, her voice already fading. "Even the smallest wolf can howl at the moon." Tonight was the winter solstice moon ceremony, the most sacred gathering in our pack's calendar, and the night when eligible unmated Omegas would be presented to Alpha King Thorn Blackwood. At 25, I was considered a late bloomer, having somehow avoided these ceremonies for years through a combination of illness, assigned border duties, and the simple fact that as the pack's only half-human Omega, I was easily forgotten. The pendant grew warm against my skin as I watched young Omegas with perfect hair and confident smiles line up at the center of the hall. Their families beamed with pride, whispering encouragements and straightening already perfect collars and dresses. My own reflection in one of the tall windows revealed a stark contrast. Plain brown dress, hair hastily pulled back, eyes too large for my face. The only remarkable thing about me was how unremarkable I was. "Ilara! What are you doing skulking in the corner?" Beta Commander Miles appeared beside me, his voice gruff but not unkind. As my direct superior in the border patrol, he was one of the few who actually remembered my name. "You should be in line with the others." "I don't belong there," I whispered, shrinking further into the shadows. "Look at them, Miles. They're beautiful, graceful purebloods. I'm just me." "Nonsense. The ceremony is mandatory for all unmated Omegas. Besides," he added, lowering his voice, "it's just a formality. Everyone knows the Alpha King won't choose anyone tonight. He hasn't chosen in 5 years. The entire pack knew the story. 5 years ago, Alpha King Thorn had lost his mate-to-be in a territorial war with the Southern Crescent Pack. Since then, he had presided over the ceremonies with cold detachment, fulfilling his duty to the ancient rituals without ever showing interest in any of the presented Omegas. The whispers said he had become as cold as the granite throne he sat upon, his heart turned to stone by grief. "Fine," I conceded, though my stomach churned with anxiety. "But I'll go last. Maybe by then he'll be too bored to notice me at all." Miles gave me a sympathetic pat on the shoulder before disappearing back into the crowd. I watched as one by one the Omegas approached the dais where Alpha Thorn sat. Even from this distance, his presence was overwhelming. Broad shoulders draped in a midnight cloak trimmed with silver fur, dark hair that curled at his nape, and eyes that seemed to pierce through each Omega who approached him. There was no denying his beauty, but it was a terrible beauty, like admiring the perfect symmetry of a predator's fangs before they tore into you. The ritual was simple. Each Omega would approach, bow, and offer their wrist for scenting. The Alpha would lean forward, inhale their scent, and then dismiss them with a nod. Occasionally, he would ask a question or two, but mostly it was a silent, efficient process. No one expected him to choose a mate tonight. This was merely tradition, a way to honor the old ways while the pack quietly accepted that their Alpha might never take another mate. As the line dwindled, my anxiety peaked. My human half made my scent different, less potent, with undertones that weren't typical for Omegas. Most Alphas found it off-putting, a reminder that my blood wasn't pure. I fingered my grandmother's pendant again, drawing strength from its familiar contours. "Last call for unmated Omegas," announced the Master of Ceremonies, his voice echoing through the hall. Several heads turned in confusion, counting the Omegas who had already presented themselves, and confirming that all had been accounted for. All except me. I stepped forward on trembling legs. I'm here," I said, my voice barely audible. Whispers immediately erupted around me. "Who is she? Has she been hiding? Is that the half-human from the border patrol?" The Master of Ceremonies looked startled, then recovered with a tight smile. "Approach the dais and present yourself to Alpha King Thorn." The walk across the polished stone floor felt endless. Each step echoed in my ears, punctuated by the racing of my heart. I kept my eyes fixed on the ground, counting the steps to keep from turning and fleeing. 1, 2, 3. When I finally reached the dais, I sank into a deep bow, my knees nearly touching the cold floor. My Alpha, I murmured, the traditional greeting feeling foreign on my tongue. I extended my wrist, pulse fluttering visibly beneath my pale skin, and waited. Seconds passed. I remained frozen, arm outstretched, eyes downcast. The silence in the hall grew oppressive. Had I done something wrong? Had I offended him somehow? I risked a glance upward. Alpha Thorn was staring at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. His eyes, a striking amber that I hadn't been able to discern from a distance, were fixed on my face with such focus that I felt physically pinned in place. He hadn't even looked at my offered wrist. "Your name," he said, his voice deep and rough, as if he rarely used it. "Ilara Gray, Alpha," I replied, my voice smaller than I intended. "Look at me properly, Ilara Gray." I raised my head fully, meeting his gaze despite every instinct telling me to show submission. This close, I could see the fine lines around his eyes, the slight shadow of stubble on his jaw, and something else, a flicker of what looked almost like recognition. He leaned forward, and instead of taking my wrist as protocol dictated, he reached for the pendant that hung around my neck. His fingers brushed against my collarbone, sending an electric shock through my body. "This symbol," he said, examining the silver wolf. "Where did you get it?" "My grandmother gave it to me before she died," I answered, confusion mingling with the fear and something else, a strange warmth spreading through my chest. "It's been in our family for generations." His eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought I saw pain flash across his features. Then his expression hardened again, becoming the impassive mask everyone knew. He dropped the pendant and finally took my offered wrist, bringing it to his nose in one swift motion. The moment he inhaled my scent, something extraordinary happened. His eyes widened, pupils dilating until the amber was merely a thin ring around bottomless black. A visible shudder ran through his powerful frame, and his grip on my wrist tightened to the point of pain. "Impossible," he whispered, so quietly that only I could hear. Then, without warning, he released me and stood abruptly. The entire hall fell into shocked silence as Alpha Thorn Blackwood, who had shown no interest in any Omega for 5 long years, towered over me with an expression of mingled fury and disbelief. "The ceremony is concluded," he announced, his voice ringing through the hall. Without another word or glance in my direction, he turned and strode from the dais, disappearing through a side door that led to the private royal quarters. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, followed immediately by a wave of whispers. I remained frozen in place, my wrist still tingling where his fingers had gripped it, my heart thundering against my ribs. What had just happened? The master of ceremonies quickly announced the start of the feast, attempting to divert attention from the Alpha's unprecedented behavior. Slowly, reluctantly, the crowd began to disperse toward the banquet tables, though many continued to cast curious glances in my direction. "What did you do?" hissed a voice beside me. I turned to find Lyra Moonstone, daughter of the Pack's head council member, glaring at me with undisguised hostility. Her perfectly arranged golden curls and immaculate white dress made me acutely aware of my own plainness. "Did you say something to upset him?" No, You've ruined everything," she snapped. 5 years we've waited for him to show interest, and you had to go and provoke him." She looked me up and down with disdain. What would he possibly see in a half-breed anyway? The words stung, though they were nothing I hadn't heard before. I opened my mouth to defend myself when a firm hand gripped my elbow. "The Alpha King requests your presence, Omega Gray," said a stern-faced guard in the royal black and silver uniform. "Immediately." Fresh whispers erupted around us. Lyra's face contorted in shock and jealousy. I felt the blood drain from my face. "There must be some mistake," I stammered. "No mistake," the guard replied impassively. "Follow me." As he led me toward the same door through which the Alpha had disappeared, I clutched my grandmother's pendant like a lifeline. What could he possibly want with me? Had my scent offended him so deeply that he needed to reprimand me in private, or was there something about the pendant that had triggered his strange reaction? The guard led me through a series of corridors I had never seen before, each more opulent than the last. Finally, We stopped before a massive wooden door carved with the pack's symbol, a wolf howling at a crescent moon. "Wait here," the guard instructed, knocking once before opening the door and stepping inside. I stood alone in the corridor, my heart beating so loudly I was certain it could be heard throughout the entire pack house. When the door reopened, the guard nodded for me to enter. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into what appeared to be a private study. Bookshelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, and standing with his back to me, staring out a window at the full moon, was Alpha King Thorn Blackwood. "Leave us," he commanded without turning around. The guard bowed and exited, closing the door behind him with a sound that felt like a prison cell locking. For several long moments, neither of us spoke. I stood rooted to the spot, barely breathing, watching as the firelight played across his broad shoulders and cast his shadow long across the polished wooden floor. "Do you know what you've done?" he finally asked, his voice low and dangerous as he turned to face me. "No, Alpha," I whispered truthfully. "I don't understand what's happening." He moved toward me with the fluid grace of a predator, stopping only when he was close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. This close, I could see that his eyes weren't simply amber. They contained flecks of gold and darker brown, like sunlight filtering through autumn leaves. "5 years," he said, studying my face as if searching for something. 5 years of numbness. 5 years of carrying this. He pressed a hand to his chest. This void. "And then you walk into my hall, wearing that pendant, carrying that scent." His voice broke slightly on the last word. I wanted to step back, to put distance between us, but my body wouldn't obey. Instead, I found myself swaying slightly toward him, drawn by something I couldn't name. "What is it about my scent?" I asked, finding courage I didn't know I possessed. "What is it about this pendant that disturbs you so?" His hand moved again, this time to cup my face. His palm was warm and rough against my cheek, and I couldn't help but lean into the touch, even as my mind screamed at the impropriety. "No kiss can save me," he whispered, the words seeming to come from someplace deep and wounded. That's what I told myself after Serena died. That no Omega, no matter how sweet their scent or beautiful their face, could ever fill the void she left. He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching mine. "But your scent, it's like hers, but different. Wilder. More complex. And that pendant," his thumb brushed over it again. "It belonged to her family. An heirloom passed down through generations of her bloodline." I gasped, pieces falling into place. "My grandmother was Eliza Moonheart before she married my grandfather. She left the pack decades ago when she fell in love with a human." Alpha Thorn's eyes blazed. "Moonheart. Serena was a Moonheart, the last of her line, or so we thought." His hand dropped from my face to grip my shoulders. "You're her cousin. Distant, perhaps, but of the same blood." The room seemed to spin around me. I was related to the Alpha's dead mate? Was that why he had reacted so strongly to me? Because I reminded him of what he had lost. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. I didn't know. His expression softened fractionally. "No, you couldn't have known, but the moon goddess knew. She has played a cruel joke on us both tonight, Alara Gray." He released me and stepped back, his face closing off again. "You may go." "What?" I blinked in confusion at the sudden dismissal. "Return to the ceremony. Enjoy the feast. Forget this conversation happened." His voice was flat, emotionless again. "There is nothing for you here." But as I turned to leave, my pendant caught the firelight, throwing silver reflections across the wall. Alpha Thorn made a strangled sound, and when I looked back, the pain in his eyes was so raw it stole my breath. "Or perhaps," he said, so quietly I almost didn't hear, "the moon goddess isn't being cruel at all." I didn't return to the feast. How could I, with my mind reeling and my body still humming from Alpha Thorn's touch? Instead, I slipped through a side entrance and made my way to the only place I ever felt truly at peace, the pack's ancient library, tucked away in the east wing of the massive stone structure we called home. The library was deserted tonight, with everyone either at the ceremony or the feast that followed. I wound my way through towering shelves, inhaling the comforting smell of old parchment and leather bindings, until I reached my favorite alcove. A window seat overlooked the forest and the lake beyond, silver-tipped waves reflecting the full moon's glow. The moon goddess isn't being cruel at all, I whispered, repeating Alpha Thorn's parting words. What had he meant? And why did my heart race at the memory of his amber eyes searching mine, as if looking for something lost? I touched my pendant, now heavy with new meaning. All these years, I'd treasured it as my last connection to my grandmother, never knowing it linked me to the Alpha's tragic past, to Serena Moonheart, the woman whose death had turned our Alpha into a shell of himself. My distant cousin, according to Thorn. I thought I might find you here. I startled at the voice, nearly falling from the window seat. Beta Commander Miles stood in the shadow of a bookshelf, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Everyone's looking for you, he said, stepping closer. After what happened at the ceremony, let them look, I replied, turning back to the window. I've spent my whole life being invisible. They can manage one night without finding me. Miles sighed, settling onto the opposite end of the window seat. I've known you for 3 years, Alara. Trained you myself for border patrol, and in all that time, I've never seen you hide from anything. Not rogue wolves, not territorial disputes, not even that bear we encountered last spring. His voice softened. So why are you hiding now? The question hung between us. Why was I hiding? Because for the first time in my life I wasn't invisible. Because the most powerful Alpha in the territory had looked at me, really looked at me, and I had no idea what to do with that attention. He said I remind him of her, I finally admitted. Of Serena. Miles stiffened. He spoke to you about Serena? I nodded. Apparently my grandmother was from the same bloodline. The pendant was a Moonheart family heirloom. Gods above, Miles whispered, running a hand through his sandy hair. No wonder he reacted that way. Do you understand what this means, Alara? That I'm a painful reminder of what he lost? The words tasted bitter. No. Miles leaned forward, his expression serious. It means you might be what he needs. Before I could respond, a commotion echoed from the library entrance. Voices calling my name, footsteps hurrying between shelves. Miles and I exchanged alarmed glances. Go, he urged, standing. Use the back stairs behind the historical archives. I'll tell them I haven't seen you. I hesitated. Why are you helping me? His eyes softened with something like affection. Because everyone deserves a chance to find their path without the entire pack watching. Go. I slipped through the narrow door he indicated, emerging onto a spiral staircase I'd never noticed before. The stone steps wound downward, cool and damp beneath my feet. At the bottom, a simple wooden door led outside, depositing me in a small garden, tucked between the pack house and the forest's edge. The night air felt electric against my skin, charged with the energy of the full moon overhead. My wolf stirred beneath the surface, drawn by the silver light and the scents of pine and earth. Before I could reconsider, I was running. My dress hiked up around my knees, toward the dense line of trees. I didn't shift. I rarely did, my half-human blood making the transformation more painful than it was for purebloods. But I ran with my wolf's instincts guiding me. Deeper into the forest, away from voices and politics and the weight of eyes that had never seen me until tonight. The forest embraced me like an old friend, branches reaching out to brush my shoulders, roots rising to guide my feet. I ran until my lungs burned and sweat dampened my hairline, until the pack house was nothing but a distant glow through the trees. Only then did I slow, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I leaned against the rough bark of an ancient oak. I closed my eyes, focusing on the sensations around me. The whisper of leaves, the distant call of an owl, A twig snapped to my left. My eyes flew open, body tensing. I wasn't alone. You run well for someone who rarely shifts, came a deep voice from the shadows. Alpha Thorn stepped into a patch of moonlight, his cloak discarded, leaving him in a simple black shirt that did little to disguise the power of his frame. He moved with the easy confidence of an apex predator, someone who had never questioned his place in the world. How did you find me? I asked, too shocked to remember proper protocol. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I am the Alpha. There isn't a corner of my territory I cannot track. The smile faded. Though I admit, your scent was challenging. It changes, shifts between human and wolf in a way I've never encountered. I stiffened, old insecurities rising, another reminder that I don't fully belong anywhere. Or perhaps, he countered, moving closer, a reminder that you belong everywhere. Both worlds, both bloods, flowing through your veins. The unexpected perspective left me speechless. All my life, my mixed heritage had been a mark against me, a reason to be overlooked and underestimated. Never had anyone suggested it might be a strength. "Why did you run?" he asked, his voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. The truth spilled from my lips before I could stop it. "Because I was afraid." "Of me?" A shadow crossed his face. "No," I whispered, "of me. Of what I felt when you touched me." My hand rose unconsciously to where his fingers had brushed my cheek. "I've spent my entire life being forgettable, Alpha Thorn. Being noticed. It's terrifying." He considered this, head tilted slightly. "Call me Thorn," he said finally. "At least when we're alone." The intimacy of the request made
I couldn't
my pulse
possibly.
jump. "Please." The word seemed to cost him something, dragged from somewhere deep and rusty with disuse. "Thorn," I tested, the name feeling foreign and forbidden on my tongue. He closed his eyes briefly as if in pain. When he opened them again, they gleamed with an intensity that made me tremble. "There's something happening between us," he said, closing the distance until barely a handspan separated us. "Something I don't understand. For 5 years I've felt nothing. No connection, no interest, he hesitated. No desire. And then you walked into my hall, wearing Serena's family pendant, carrying a scent that is both familiar and entirely new. And suddenly He trailed off, frustration evident in the tight line of his jaw. "You're what?" I prompted, scarcely breathing. "Alive," he finished, the word emerging like a confession. "For the first time in 5 years, I feel alive." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Because I remind you of her?" "No." His hand rose to cup my face again, thumb tracing my cheekbone with unexpected tenderness. "Because you remind me of nothing and no one I've ever known." The forest seemed to fall silent around us, the entire world narrowing to this moment. This man, this impossible connection neither of us had sought. I should have stepped back, should have remembered my place, his position, the hundreds of protocols and traditions that stood between an Alpha King and a half-human Omega from the Border Patrol. Instead, I leaned into his touch, my eyes drifting closed of their own accord. The snap of a branch shattered the moment. Thorn's hand dropped away as he spun toward the sound, placing his body between me and the potential threat in one fluid motion. "Alpha," called a hesitant voice. "Are you there?" Thorn's posture relaxed slightly, though irritation flashed across his features. "What is it, Darius?" A young guard emerged from the trees, his expression cycling from relief to confusion when he spotted me behind Thorn. "Forgive the interruption, my Alpha," the guard said, bowing deeply. "But the Council is requesting your presence. The delegates from the Northern Ridgepack have arrived early and are demanding an audience tonight." Thorn's jaw tightened. "Tell them I'll be there shortly." The guard bowed again and retreated, though not without casting a curious glance in my direction. Once he was gone, Thorn turned back to me, regret evident in his expression. "Duty calls," he said, his voice once again taking on the formal tone of the Alpha King. "As it always does," I nodded, suddenly aware of how inappropriate our encounter had been. "Of course, I should return as well. Alara." He caught my hand as I moved to step around him. "What happened here tonight? What almost happened? I need time to understand it." "I understand," I said, though disappointment coiled in my stomach. It was a momentary madness. The moon, the ceremony, the connection to Serena. It's natural you might feel confused. His grip on my hand tightened. "That's not what I meant." His eyes searched mine with an intensity that stole my breath. "I meant that this, whatever this is between us, it's too important to rush. I need time to do this right." Before I could process his words, he raised my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles that sent heat spiraling through my entire body. "Return to the pack house by the eastern path," he instructed, releasing my hand reluctantly. "It will bring you to the kitchens. Fewer people to notice your arrival." With that, he turned and disappeared into the trees, leaving me alone with my thundering heart and the lingering warmth of his lips on my skin. I followed his directions, mind reeling. The eastern path was indeed less traveled, and I managed to slip into the pack house through the busy kitchens without drawing attention. The feast was still in full swing, judging by the sounds echoing from the main hall. But I had no desire to join the festivities. Instead, I made my way to the small room I shared with 2 other unmated Omegas. Relieved to find it empty, I sank onto my narrow bed, fingers automatically reaching for my pendant. Even the smallest wolf can howl at the moon. My grandmother's words took on new meaning now. Had she known? Had she suspected that someday this pendant would lead me to the Alpha? A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I opened it to find a young servant holding a small, intricately carved wooden box. "For you, Omega Grey," she said, extending the box with a curious expression. From the Alpha King himself, whispers would spread by morning, I knew. An Alpha sending a gift to an Omega. It was unprecedented in recent years, especially from our reclusive king. My hands trembled as I accepted the box, thanking the servant before closing the door. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the box for several long moments. The wood was dark, polished to a high shine, with the pack symbol carved into the lid. Slowly, I opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, lay a single white rose, its petals silvered at the edges as if touched by moonlight. Beside it was a small folded note written in a strong angular hand. "Tomorrow. Sunset, the old temple by the lake. Tia summons from the Alpha King himself." My heart raced with equal parts excitement and terror. What did he want? What did any of this mean? I carefully lifted the rose, inhaling its sweet, delicate scent. As I did, I noticed something else in the box. A small, leather-bound book, its cover worn with age. I set the rose aside and picked up the book, opening it to find pages filled with the same angular handwriting as the note. The personal journal of Thorn Blackwood, Alpha King of the Silver Crescent Pack. My breath caught. This was no ordinary gift. This was an offering of trust so profound it made my hands shake. Alphas guarded their private thoughts fiercely, especially alphas of Thorn's status. To share his journal with me, a half-human Omega he barely knew. The first entry was dated 5 years ago, the day Serena died. Today, I died with her. 3 simple words that contained an ocean of grief. I closed the book quickly, unable to bear the intimacy of his pain. This wasn't something to be read hastily. This was Thorn offering me a window into his soul, a chance to understand the man behind the Alpha's mask. I returned the journal to its box, alongside the rose and the note, and slid it beneath my bed. Tomorrow at sunset, I would meet him at the old temple. Tomorrow, perhaps, I would begin to understand what was happening between us. This impossible, unexpected connection that had awakened something in both of us. Outside my window, the full moon continued its silent journey across the sky, witness to secrets and possibilities that had never seemed within my reach before tonight. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned, my mind replaying every moment with Thorn, the shock in his eyes when he scented me, the gentleness of his touch in the forest, the weight of his journal hidden beneath my bed. By the time dawn painted the sky in watercolor hues of pink and gold, I had convinced myself a dozen times that I had imagined it all, that the Alpha King couldn't possibly be interested in someone like me. My roommates returned just before sunrise, giggling and flush-faced from the feast. They barely acknowledged me, too absorbed in their own excitement to notice the wooden box I'd hastily pushed deeper under my bed. "Did you hear?" asked Nadia, the younger of the two, as she collapsed onto her bed. "The Northern Ridge delegates arrived early. Everyone's saying it's because they heard about what happened at the ceremony." I kept my expression carefully neutral. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what we mean," said Kira, the other Omega, rolling her eyes. "The way Alpha Thorn reacted to you. The way he stormed out of the ceremony after scenting you." She leaned closer, eyes narrowed. "What did you do to him, Alara?" "Nothing," I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. I hadn't done anything deliberately. Well, something happened, Nadia insisted. And now the northern delegates are here a week early, and there are whispers about alliance negotiations. My stomach twisted. The Northern Ridge Pack was powerful, nearly equal to our own in strength and resources. An alliance would benefit both packs, especially with rumors of rogues organizing in the unclaimed territories to the west. And the most common way to cement such alliances was a mating, Kira said, confirming my fears. They've brought Alpha Fenris's daughter, Isolde. They say she's the most beautiful Omega born in 3 generations. She studied my face carefully. Whatever happened between you and our Alpha last night, don't get your hopes up, half-blood. No Alpha would choose a border patrol nobody over an alliance with the Northern Ridge. Her words stung, but they weren't anything I hadn't told myself 100 times since last night. Whatever connection had flared between Thorn and me in the forest, the reality of his position, and mine, couldn't be ignored. I rose from my bed, gathering my border patrol uniform. I have morning duty, I said, though it was a lie. After the ceremony, I was supposed to have the day off, but I needed to escape the suffocating confines of the room and the pitying glances of my roommates. The cold morning air cleared my head as I made my way to the patrol outpost at the eastern border. A few early rising pack members gave me curious looks as I passed, no doubt recognizing me from the ceremony, but no one approached. News traveled fast in a wolf pack, but apparently not fast enough for everyone to know about the half-blood Omega who had disrupted the winter solstice ceremony. The outpost was quiet when I arrived, just a handful of wolves preparing for the morning patrol. I spotted a familiar figure checking the duty roster and felt a wave of relief. Miles, I called, approaching the beta commander. I know I'm not scheduled, but I was hoping I could join today's patrol. He turned, surprise evident on his face. Ilara, what are you doing here, after last night? Please, I interrupted, not wanting to discuss what had happened. I need the distraction. Understanding dawned in his eyes. The forest always was your sanctuary, he said quietly. Then, louder for the benefit of the other wolves, we're short-handed on the eastern ridge today. You can take point with Gareth. I nodded gratefully, collecting the necessary equipment from the supply room. Within minutes, I was striding into the forest with Gareth, a quiet beta who preferred action to conversation, exactly what I needed this morning. The familiar routine of patrol soothed my frayed nerves. We checked boundary markers, looked for signs of intrusion, and monitored the wildlife movements that might indicate trouble. Hours passed, and for brief stretches, I was able to forget about Alpha Thorn, the pendant, and the mysterious connection that had upended my carefully constructed life. But as the sun climbed higher, my thoughts inevitably returned to Thorn's note. Sunset. The old temple by the lake. What would happen when I met him there? What did he want from me? You're distracted, Gareth observed as we paused to drink from our canteens. Not like you. I shrugged, embarrassed at being so transparent. Sorry, just tired. He looked unconvinced but didn't press. We should head back. Storm's coming. He nodded toward the northern sky, where dark clouds were gathering on the horizon. I followed his gaze, frowning. The clouds were moving quickly, unusually so for this time of year. That doesn't look natural, I murmured. Gareth stiffened beside me. Witch weather, he agreed, using the old pack term for magically manipulated storms. We need to report this. We abandoned the rest of our patrol route, moving quickly through the forest toward the outpost. The wind picked up around us, carrying the scent of ozone and something else. Something metallic and wrong that made my wolf bristle beneath my skin. We were still a mile from the outpost when the first howl pierced the air, the pack's alarm call. Gareth and I exchanged grim looks before breaking into a run. The scene that greeted us at the pack compound was chaos. Wolves in various states of shift moved purposefully between buildings, securing windows and doors against the unnatural storm that now loomed directly overhead. Cubs were being ushered into the underground shelters, while warriors assembled in the central courtyard. I spotted Miles shouting orders and made my way to him. What's happening? The northern delegation, he said grimly. It wasn't a diplomatic visit, it was a cover for an attack. His eyes were hard with anger. They brought a witch with them. She's summoning the storm as a distraction while their warriors position themselves in the forest. Cold dread settled in my stomach. Why? We've had peace with the Northern Ridge for decades. Territory. Resources. Miles shook his head. Does it matter? They came prepared for war, hiding behind offers of alliance. He gripped my shoulder. I need you to help evacuate the remaining Omegas and Cubs to the tunnels. Then join the second defensive line at the eastern wall. I nodded, turning to go, when a thought stopped me cold. Where's Alpha Thorn? Miles's expression darkened, confronting Alpha Fenris in the Great Hall. The bastard had the audacity to demand our surrender, claiming his witch's storm would destroy the compound if Thorn refused. My heart lurched. Confronting an enemy Alpha who had brought magical backup was incredibly dangerous, even for someone as powerful as Thorn. Alone? He's facing them alone? He ordered the council and royal guards to protect the pack, Miles said. You know our Alpha. He puts the safety of the pack above all else. Including his own life. The words hung unspoken between us. I should have followed Miles's orders, should have helped with the evacuation, then taken my place on the defensive line. Instead, I found myself running toward the Great Hall, driven by an impulse I couldn't explain. A desperate need to be where Thorn was, to make sure he wasn't facing this threat alone. The massive doors of the Great Hall were guarded by 2 warriors who moved to block my path. No one enters, one said firmly. Alpha's orders. I heard raised voices from within. Thorn's deep command, answered by another Alpha's arrogant snarl. I'm needed inside, I insisted, reaching for the argument most likely to sway them. I have information from the Eastern Border Patrol that the Alpha needs to hear immediately. The guards exchanged uncertain glances. Their training to follow the Alpha's orders, warring with their duty to ensure he had all necessary intelligence. Finally, the elder of the 2 nodded. Quickly, he said, opening the door just enough for me to slip through. Stay by the wall and speak only when addressed. I murmured thanks and slipped into the Great Hall, immediately pressing myself against the shadowed wall as instructed. The scene before me made my blood run cold. In the center of the hall stood Thorn, magnificent in his fury, facing a gray-haired Alpha with cruel eyes who could only be Alpha Fenris of the Northern Ridge. Behind Fenris stood a small woman in a dark cloak, her eyes an unnatural violet, the witch responsible for the storm. And beside Fenris, looking uncomfortable but resolute, was a strikingly beautiful female with silver blonde hair. Isolde, I presumed. Your father tried this same tactic 30 years ago, Thorn was saying, his voice dangerously soft. He failed then, just as you will fail now. Fenris laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the stone walls. My father didn't have Morgana's power, he replied, nodding toward the witch. And he didn't have a legitimate claim to your territory. Legitimate claim? Thorn's incredulity was edged with rage. There is nothing legitimate about sneaking a witch into my packlands under the pretense of peace talks. But there is something legitimate about blood rights, Fenris countered smoothly. Isolde, show him. The beautiful Omega stepped forward, reaching into her bodice to withdraw a pendant, identical to mine. The silver wolf gleamed in the dim light of the hall, and I had to stifle a gasp. Thorn went rigid. Where did you get that? It belongs to my bloodline, Isolde said, her voice cultured and confident. I am the last living descendant of the Moonheart family, Serena's cousin from her mother's sister, who married into the Northern Ridge Pack generations ago. I watched the color drain from Thorn's face. Impossible. The Moonheart line ended with Serena. So you believed, Fenris said with undisguised triumph. But blood doesn't lie, and Isolde carries the Moonheart birthmark, the crescent moon behind her left ear. He turned to his daughter. Show him. Isolde obediently lifted her silver hair, revealing a small crescent-shaped mark on her skin. Even from where I stood, I could see Thorn's shock. By pack law, Fenris continued, when a mated alpha loses their omega, the omega's family has the right to offer another mate from the same bloodline. Isolde is that offering. His smile was all teeth. Accept her as your mate, and our packs will be united. Refuse, and we take what is rightfully ours by force. The pendant at my throat seemed to burn against my skin. I reached up to touch it, mind racing. My grandmother had given me this pendant, claiming it was a Moonheart heirloom. Did that mean I too carried Moonheart blood? Was I, like Isolde, a distant relative of Serena? But I had no birthmark behind my ear. I would have noticed such a thing in my 25 years. Unless... A memory surfaced, my grandmother applying a special salve behind my ear every full moon throughout my childhood, murmuring that it would keep me safe. Had she been hiding a birthmark, concealing my connection to the Moonheart line to protect me from exactly this type of power play? Thorn was speaking again, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. Even if what you say is true, Fenris, forcing a mating is against all pack law. The moon goddess herself would curse such a union. Then make it willing, Fenris countered. Court her, woo her, I don't care how you dress it up, Blackwood, but make her your queen, or watch your pack burn beneath Morgana's storm. As if summoned by his words, thunder shook the hall, and the witch's violet eyes gleamed with malicious pleasure. Thorn's gaze swept the room, and for a brief moment, our eyes met across the hall. Recognition flashed in his amber depths, followed by something that looked almost like desperation. Then, his expression hardened into the impassive mask of the Alpha King. I need time to consider, he said to Fenris. The storm ceases now, and your warriors retreat to agreed boundaries. Give me until tomorrow's moonrise to make my decision. Fenris considered this, then nodded. Agreed. But Isolde stays here, as our ambassador. The implication was clear. She was both offering and hostage, ensuring Thorn could not simply attack once the northern forces withdrew. Fine, Thorn conceded. She will be given quarters in the guest wing and treated with all due respect. With negotiations temporarily concluded, the Northern Alpha turned to leave, the witch following in his wake. Isolde remained, her perfect features arranged in a serene smile that didn't reach her calculating eyes. I look forward to getting to know my future mate, she said to Thorn, her voice honeyed poison. Thorn said nothing, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. Only when Fenris and the witch had left the hall did he seem to breathe again. Leave us, he commanded the few guards who remained. His eyes found mine again. Except you, Alara, you stay. The guards filed out, casting curious glances between me and Isolde as they went. When the massive doors closed behind them, silence fell heavy in the hall. Isolde looked me up and down, her perfect features arranging themselves into an expression of disdain. Who is this? She asked Thorn. Some servant? Border Patrol, Thorn corrected, his voice clipped. And someone with more courage and honor than your entire pack combined. Color rose in Isolde's cheeks. You dare insult my pack while considering an alliance? I'm not considering anything, Thorn growled. Your father's ultimatum means nothing to me. The Silver Crescent Pack does not bend to threats. Isolde's eyes narrowed. Then you are a fool. My father's witch can level this entire compound with a single storm. Is your pride worth the lives of your people? Is your ambition worth the lives of yours? Thorn countered. Because make no mistake, Isolde Moonheart, if your father forces this conflict, there will be casualties on both sides. I watched the exchange, heart pounding. The tension between them was palpable, two powerful wolves circling each other in a battle of wills. And I stood forgotten in the shadows, witness to a power struggle that could determine the fate of both packs. Or at least I thought I was forgotten, until Thorn's next words shattered that illusion. Show her your pendant, Alara, he said quietly, his eyes never leaving Isolde's face. My hand instinctively went to my throat, where the silver wolf hung from its leather cord. Isolde's gaze followed the movement, her eyes widening as I stepped forward into the light, and slowly pulled the pendant from beneath my collar. Impossible, she whispered, echoing Thorn's earlier denial. That pendant belongs to my bloodline. As does mine, I said, finding my voice. Given to me by my grandmother, Eliza Moonheart. Isolde recoiled as if slapped. Eliza was disowned, cast out for mating a human, her eyes raked over me with new understanding. You're the half-breed, The abomination. The words were familiar barbs, ones I'd heard whispered behind my back my entire life. But somehow, with Thorn watching, they didn't sting as they once had. "I am Alara Gray," I said, lifting my chin, granddaughter of Eliza Moonheart, border patrol officer of the Silver Crescent Pack, and yes, half human. I took a step closer to her, driven by some instinct I didn't fully understand. But I have never needed to hide behind threats or witches to get what I want. Isolde's face contorted with rage. "How dare you—" "Enough!" Thorn interrupted, his voice quiet but commanding. "Isolde, you will be shown to your quarters now. We will speak again before your father returns tomorrow." He snapped his fingers, and guards immediately entered as if they had been waiting just outside the door. With a venomous glare in my direction, Isolde allowed herself to be escorted from the hall. When the doors closed behind her, Thorn's shoulders sagged slightly, the only sign of the immense pressure he was under. He turned to me, his amber eyes troubled. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, but there was no rebuke in his tone. "I couldn't stay away," I admitted. "Not when I heard you were facing them alone." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I'm the Alpha King. I'm always alone." The smile faded. "At least I was until you walked into my hall wearing that pendant." He closed the distance between us, reaching out to touch the silver wolf that hung at my throat. Two pendants, identical in every way, two women of the same bloodline. His eyes searched mine, but only one makes my wolf howl. My breath caught. "What happens now?" Thorn's expression darkened. "Now I find a way to protect my pack without surrendering to Fenris's demands." His hand moved from my pendant to cut my cheek. "And without losing you just when I've found you." The tenderness in his touch contrasted sharply with the steel in his voice. This was a man accustomed to impossible choices, to carrying the weight of an entire pack on his shoulders. And now, somehow, I had become one more complication in an already desperate situation. "Our meeting at sunset," I said suddenly, remembering his note. "The old temple by the lake," Thorn nodded. "More important now than ever." His thumb traced my cheekbone gently. "There are things you need to know, Alara. Things about your grandmother, about the Moonheart line, about why your pendant and Isolde's are identical." "And about this?" I asked, turning my head slightly to reveal the skin behind my left ear. Thorn's eyes widened as he brushed my hair aside. "The mark," he whispered. "It's there, but faded, almost invisible. My grandmother applied a salve there every full moon when I was a child," I explained. "I always thought it was some human tradition. Now I wonder if she was hiding it, protecting me." "Protecting you from exactly this," Thorn agreed. "Fenris has been planning this for years, grooming Isolde to take Serena's place, to claim rights to our territory through blood ties." His expression hardened. "But he didn't know about you. What difference does it make?" I asked. "If the goal is a mate from the Moonheart line, Isolde is the perfect choice, pure-blooded, beautiful, trained for the role. I'm just everything they are not," Thorn finished for me. "Genuine, brave, untainted by their ambition." His voice dropped lower. "And the only Omega who has made me feel anything in 5 years." The words hung between us, heavy with promise and complication. Outside, the witch's storm had calmed to a gentle rain, but we both knew the true tempest was yet to come. "Sunset," Thorn said again, stepping back reluctantly. "I must meet with the council now, prepare the pack for whatever comes tomorrow. But at sunset, meet me at the temple." His eyes held mine, intense and unwavering. "Promise me, Alara." "I promise," I whispered, though every instinct warned that our meeting would change everything. For us, for the pack, for the delicate peace that now balanced on the edge of a blade. As I slipped from the great hall, Thorn's words echoed in my mind. "Only one makes my wolf howl." Despite the danger looming over the pack, despite Isolde's claims and Fenris's threats, a small, fierce hope kindled in my chest. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. For the first time, I wasn't just the half-blood Omega everyone forgot. I was Alara Gray, granddaughter of Eliza Moonheart. And somehow, impossibly, I had awakened something in the Alpha King that no one else could touch. The hours until sunset stretched like an eternity. I returned to border patrol duties, needing the distraction, though my mind remained fixated on the coming meeting with Thorn. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, I slipped away, following the hidden path to the old temple by the lake. The temple was ancient, a circular stone structure open to the sky, 12 columns supporting nothing but air and memory. It predated even our pack, built by the first shifters who settled these lands centuries ago. Few visited it now, considering it a relic of older, more superstitious times. Thorn was already there when I arrived, his powerful silhouette outlined against the setting sun. He turned at my approach, and the naked emotion in his eyes stole my breath. "You came," he said simply. I promised I would. He extended his hand, and I took it without hesitation. His fingers were warm and strong around mine as he led me to the center of the temple, where an ancient stone altar stood, worn smooth by time and elements. "This is where it happened," he said quietly. "Where Serena and I were to be mated, before the attack that took her life." Pain flickered across his features. "For 5 years I've avoided this place." "Why bring me here now?" I asked. "Because some cycles need to be broken." He turned to face me fully. "Alara, what I'm about to tell you, about the Moon Heart line, about your grandmother, about you, it changes everything." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small, leather-bound book, different from the journal he had sent me. This one was older, its cover cracked with age. "The Moon Heart family wasn't just any werewolf bloodline," he began. "They were guardians, specially chosen by the moon goddess herself to protect the balance between packs." He opened the book to reveal pages covered in ancient symbols. "The crescent birthmark is the goddess's sign, marking those chosen for this duty." "But my grandmother left the pack," I said, trying to understand. "She chose a human mate." "She did." Thorn nodded. "And for that, the Moonhearts declared her dead to them. But what they didn't know, what even she might not have known until later, was that she was carrying the last pure Moonheart bloodline." My hand instinctively went to my pendant. "And Isolde is of Moonheart descent, yes, but through a diluted line. The pendant she wears is a replica, created by the Northern Pack's witch to strengthen her claim." His eyes met mine. "Yours is the original, the true Guardian's pendant." The implications made my head spin. "So when you scented me at the ceremony—" "My wolf recognized what you are," he confirmed. "Not just a Moonheart, but the last true Guardian, the one destined to restore balance." "And what does that mean for us, for the packs?" Thorn's expression softened as he stepped closer. "It means you have a choice to make, Alara Gray. One that will determine the fate of both packs." Before he could explain further, a cold voice cut through the twilight air. How touching. We whirled to find Isolde standing at the temple entrance, Fenris and the witch Morgana flanking her. The Northern Alpha's eyes gleamed with malicious triumph. "You've saved us the trouble of hunting you both down," Fenris said, stepping forward. "How convenient." Thorn moved protectively in front of me. "The deadline isn't until tomorrow's moonrise, Fenris. Plans change," the Northern Alpha replied with a shrug. "Especially when my daughter discovers her supposed mate meeting secretly with a half-breed." His gaze shifted to me, cold and calculating. "Though I must admit, finding Eliza's granddaughter is an unexpected bonus. 2 Moonheart descendants instead of 1. "You knew about me?" I asked, stunned. "We've always known of Eliza's disgrace," Isolde answered, her beautiful face twisted with contempt. "But we assumed any offspring would be too diluted to matter." Clearly we underestimated the strength of the bloodline. The witch Morgana stepped forward, her unnatural violet eyes fixed on my pendant. "The original," she breathed, her voice like dry leaves rustling. "All these years searching, and here it hangs around the neck of a half-human nobody." Understanding dawned. "You never wanted an alliance," I said to Fenris. "You wanted the pendant, the Guardian's power." "Smart girl," Fenris smiled, showing too many teeth. Isolde's claim as Thorn's mate was merely a convenient path to gaining control of both packs. "But your pendant offers a more direct route to power." Thorn's body tensed beside me. "You'll have to go through me to get it." "With pleasure," Fenris growled, beginning to shift. Bones cracked and reformed as his body contorted, gray fur erupting across his skin as he transformed into his wolf form, larger than any wolf I'd ever seen, with battle scars crisscrossing his massive body. Thorn immediately began his own transformation, his black wolf even larger than Fenris's, eyes glowing amber in the fading light. The two alphas circled each other, teeth bared, while Isolde and Morgana watched with cold anticipation. I stood frozen, my half-human blood making my own shift too slow to help in the immediate fight. But as the alphas lunged at each other in a blur of fur and fangs, my pendant began to glow with silver light. "The Guardian awakens," Morgana hissed, moving toward me with outstretched hands. "Give me the pendant, girl, before its power consumes you." But the pendant wasn't consuming me. It was filling me with strength I'd never known I possessed. The glow spread from the silver wolf to encompass my entire body, and suddenly I understood what my grandmother had been protecting me for. "I am the last guardian," I said, my voice resonating with newfound power. "And you will not destroy the balance between our packs." I raised my hands, and the silver light shot forth like moonbeams, separating the fighting alphas and forming a barrier around the temple. Fenris snarled in frustration, hurling himself against the light only to be thrown backward. Morgana began chanting, violet energy crackling around her fingers as she attempted to counter my power, but the moon heart magic, pure, untainted by ambition or hatred, proved stronger. Her spell rebounded, sending her crumbling to her knees. "Enough," I commanded, the Guardian's authority flowing through me. "There will be no war between our packs. The moon goddess has chosen her path." I turned to Thorn, who had shifted back to human form, watching me with awe and something else. Something that made my heart soar despite the danger surrounding us. "No kiss can save me," he had once whispered in grief. But as I stepped toward him, the silver light still emanating from my body, I knew differently. "Let me prove you wrong," I whispered, and pressed my lips to his. The kiss ignited the final transformation, not of body, but of soul. The Guardian's power flowed between us, healing old wounds, forging a bond that transcended pack politics and ancient feuds. When we parted, the silver light had encompassed everyone in the temple. Fenris, returned to human form, looked stunned. Isolde's face reflected confusion and perhaps a touch of relief. Even Morgana seemed transfixed by the magic swirling around us. "This is the true power of the Moonheart line," Thorn announced, his hand firmly clasped in mine. "Not domination, but harmony. Not conquest, but healing." And as the first stars appeared in the twilight sky, I finally understood why the smallest wolf could still howl at the moon, because sometimes the quietest voice carries the strongest magic.